Captain Marcus Chun had seen his fair share of strange things in the Outer Rim territories, but nothing quite prepared him for the sight of a violet-skinned woman chained to the wall of a Korthax slave ship. Her ethereal beauty struck him immediately. Luminescent silver hair that seemed to move with its own gentle current, eyes like twin galaxies swirling with deep purples and blues, and delicate features that belonged more in ancient Earth mythology than in the grimy cargo hold of a pirate vessel. The rescue operation had been routine enough. His crew aboard the human frigate Defiant had intercepted distress signals from 3 different species, all victims of the notorious Korthak raiders who had been terrorizing this sector for months. The Galactic Council had been slow to respond, as usual, tied up in bureaucratic red tape and interspecies politics. But Marcus had never been one to wait for official permission when lives were at stake. "Captain, we've secured the Zolonian prisoners," reported his first officer, Lieutenant Sarah Rodriguez, through his comm unit. "The Thraxians are in medical bay too. But you need to see this one yourself." Marcus found himself standing before the mysterious woman, her wrists bound by energy shackles that pulsed with a sickly green light. She watched him with those impossible eyes, saying nothing, but he could sense an intelligence there that seemed ancient and knowing. The universal translator on his collar sparked to life as she finally spoke. "Another captor," she said, her voice carrying a musical quality that seemed to resonate in his chest. "I suppose you expect me to be grateful for the change in ownership." "You're not a captive," Marcus replied, reaching for the control pad that would release her restraints. "I'm Captain Marcus Chun of the Earth Defense Fleet. We're here to rescue you." She tilted her head, studying him with an expression that might have been curiosity or amusement. "Rescue? An interesting concept. And what do you expect in return for this rescue?" The energy shackles dissolved with a soft hiss, and she rubbed her wrists where the restraints had left faint marks on her skin. Even in the dim lighting of the cargo hold, those marks seemed to fade before his eyes. "Nothing," Marcus said. "That's what rescue means. We'll transport you to the nearest safe harbor, wherever you need to go." For the first time, something shifted in her expression. Surprise, perhaps, or disbelief. "You speak as though you expect no payment, no service, no entertainment." The last word carried a weight that made Marcus's jaw tighten with anger at what she must have endured. "The only thing I expect," he said firmly, "is for you to tell me if you need medical attention. Our doctor can treat most known species." She stood slowly, and Marcus realized she was taller than he'd initially thought, nearly matching his own 6-foot frame. The ragged remains of what had once been elegant clothing hung from her lithe form, and she moved with a fluid grace that seemed almost otherworldly. "I am Zarathul of the Elevani," she said, and somehow the name seemed to carry weight, as though she were announcing a title rather than simply introducing herself. "And I require no medical attention. My people heal quickly." The Elevani? Marcus searched his memory of the Galactic Species database. The name was familiar, but he couldn't place it immediately. "I don't think I'm familiar with your people." Something that might have been a smile played at the corners of her mouth. "Most are not, anymore. We prefer it that way." Over the next few hours, as the Defiant made its way toward the nearest neutral station, Marcus found himself drawn back to the guest quarters where they'd housed Zarathul. She had accepted their offer of new clothes, a standard jumpsuit that somehow looked elegant on her, and had eaten sparingly from the selection of foods their computer had deemed compatible with her physiology. But she remained an enigma. Every conversation felt like a careful dance, with her revealing just enough to maintain his interest while keeping her true nature carefully hidden. She spoke of her people as though they were myths, of worlds that existed beyond the charted territories, and of technologies that sounded more like magic than science. "Your species fascinates me," she said during one such conversation as they sat in the ship's small observation lounge watching the stars streak past. "Humans. You rescued complete strangers with no expectation of reward. The Korthak spoke of your people as weak because of such tendencies." Marcus settled into the chair across from her, noting how she seemed to unconsciously adjust her position to maintain what most species would consider a respectful distance. Maybe we are weak by some standards, but we found that being strong enough to help others when we don't have to makes us stronger in the long run. An interesting philosophy. She leaned forward slightly, and Marcus caught a faint scent like moonflowers and starlight. Impossible, but that was the only way his mind could process it. Tell me, Captain Chun, what will you do when we reach this neutral station? Help you contact your people, arrange passage home, whatever you need. And if I chose to stay aboard your vessel? The question caught him off guard. Stay? For how long? Perhaps indefinitely. Her galaxy eyes seemed to shimmer with some inner light. I find myself curious about humans and their strange ways. Marcus felt his pulse quicken, though he couldn't quite understand why. You'd be welcome, of course, but I have to ask, don't you have family? People who are worried about you. For the first time since he'd found her, real emotion flickered across Zarathal's features. Pain, perhaps, or loss. My people are scattered, and I've been away from them longer than you might imagine. Before he could ask what she meant by that, the ship's intercom crackled to life. Captain to the bridge, came Rodriguez's voice, carrying an edge of tension that made Marcus sit up straighter. Duty calls, he said, rising from his chair. We'll continue this conversation later. Of course, Captain, Zarathal replied, but something in her tone made him pause at the doorway. Is everything all right? She was quiet for a long moment, those ethereal eyes focused on something beyond the viewport. I was thinking about what you said, about being strong enough to help others when you don't have to. She looked back at him then, and for just an instant he thought he saw something vast and ancient and powerful looking back. Perhaps your people are not as weak as others believe. On the bridge, Rodriguez was bent over the sensor array, her expression grim. We've got company, Captain. 3 ships, Korthak configuration, closing fast from the port vector. Marcus slipped into his captain's chair, his mind already shifting into tactical mode. How long until they intercept? 18 minutes at current approach speed. Any idea what they want? I'd guess they want their property back. Rodriguez's voice carried the same disgust Marcus felt. The Korthak were notorious for viewing any sentient being as potential merchandise. Battle stations, Marcus ordered, his fingers flying over his console, and send a priority message to Fleet Command. If we don't make it out of this, I want them to know what happened. Sir, came the voice of his weapons officer. Our shields are at full capacity, but those are Korthak heavy cruisers. We're outgunned 3-1. Marcus nodded grimly. The Defiant was a good ship with an excellent crew, but she wasn't built for taking on multiple heavy cruisers. They'd rescued over 40 beings from that slave ship, and there was nowhere to run that wouldn't put innocent lives at risk. Do what we can, he said simply. And remember, we don't abandon people who need help. That's what makes us human. As the crew prepared for what would likely be their final battle, Marcus found his thoughts drifting to the mysterious woman in the observation lounge. There had been something in her eyes when she'd spoken of his people not being weak, something that suggested she knew more than she was letting on. The first Korthak ship opened fire just as Zarathal appeared on the bridge. No one had seen her enter, but there she was, standing beside Marcus's chair as though she belonged there. Captain, she said, her musical voice somehow carrying clearly over the sounds of battle. I believe it's time I told you who I really am. Before Marcus could respond, the ship shuddered under another barrage of enemy fire. Sparks flew from damaged consoles, and the lights flickered ominously. Hull breach on Deck 7, reported his engineering officer, and our main weapons array is down to 60%. Zarathal placed a gentle hand on Marcus's shoulder, and he felt an odd sensation, as though electricity were flowing through him. My people have a saying, she said, her eyes beginning to glow with that same inner light he'd glimpsed before. True strength is not in the power to destroy, but in the wisdom to know when such power must be used. What are you talking about? Marcus managed to ask, even as another hit sent the ship lurching to starboard. She smiled then, and for the first time it reached those impossible eyes. "I'm not just Zarathul of the Elevani, Marcus Chun. I am Zarathul the Star Weaver, last of the Guardian caste, keeper of the old ways." Her voice seemed to echo strangely, as though she were speaking from a great distance. "And I am tired of pretending to be helpless." The bridge fell silent except for the hum of failing systems and the distant sound of emergency klaxons. Every member of the crew was staring at the woman who had somehow transformed before their eyes from a rescued victim into something that radiated power like a small star. "Guardian?" Rodriguez whispered. "As in the Guardians?" From the old stories. Marcus felt his heart skip. Every child in human space knew the legends of the Guardians, mysterious beings who had supposedly watched over the galaxy in ancient times, before disappearing into myth and legend. But they were just stories, weren't they? "The Korthak have demanded my return," Zarathul continued, her hair now floating around her shoulders as though moved by an unfelt wind. "They believe I am their property to sell to the highest bidder. They do not realize that I allowed myself to be captured to learn more about them and their operations." Another barrage struck the ship, and Marcus felt the deck plates vibrate under his feet. "Can you help us?" he asked, not entirely sure he believed what he was seeing. "I can," she said simply. "But first, I need you to understand something, Marcus Chun. What I'm about to do will change how you see the universe. Once you know the truth about the Guardians, about the old powers that still move between the stars, there will be no going back to ignorance." Through the view screen, Marcus could see the nearest Korthak cruiser bearing down on them, its weapons charging for what would likely be the killing blow. Around him, his crew worked frantically to keep their dying ship operational for just a few more minutes. "Do it," he said without hesitation. "Save my people." Zarathul nodded, and the glow around her intensified until it was almost painful to look at directly. "Then witness what your kindness has awakened, Captain, and know that the Guardians have not forgotten those who show mercy to strangers." She raised her hands, and Marcus felt reality itself seemed to bend around them. The last thing he saw before the light consumed everything was her smile, brilliant and terrible and beautiful, as she prepared to remind the galaxy why the Guardians were once feared and revered across 1,000 worlds. The battle was about to end, but not in any way the Korthak could have imagined. The light that erupted from Zarathul didn't blind Marcus so much as transform his perception entirely. For a moment that lasted either seconds or centuries, he could see the universe as she saw it, vast currents of energy flowing between stars, the delicate web of gravity and time that held galaxies together, and something else, something that pulsed with intention and ancient purpose. When his vision cleared, the bridge of the Defiant was intact, but everything else had changed. Through the view screen, he could see the 3 Korthak cruisers hanging motionless in space, their hulls gleaming with the same ethereal energy that still surrounded Zarathul. They weren't destroyed, they were simply stopped, frozen in time like insects trapped in amber. "Status report." Marcus managed, his voice coming out as barely a whisper. Rodriguez checked her console with shaking hands. "All systems nominal, Captain. Hull breaches sealed. Weapons and shields back to full capacity." She looked up at him with wide eyes. "It's like the damage never happened." Zarathul lowered her hands, and the glow around her faded to a more manageable level, though her hair continued to move in that impossible wind. "The Korthak vessels are not harmed," she said, as though she were commenting on the weather. "I have simply convinced them that attacking you would be unwise." "Convinced them?" Marcus stood slowly, his legs unsteady. "They look like they're in some kind of stasis field. Time moves differently for those who understand its true nature," she replied. "To them, they have experienced a vision of what would happen if they continued their attack. They saw their ships burning, their crews dying, their entire fleet scattered across the void. They have chosen, quite wisely, to retreat." Even as she spoke, the Korthak ships began to move again, turning away from the Defiant with what looked suspiciously like panic. Within minutes, they had jumped to hyperspace, leaving only the fading traces of their engine trails. The bridge crew sat in stunned silence, trying to process what they had witnessed. It was Rodriguez who finally found her voice. "Ma'am, if you don't mind me asking, what exactly are you?" Zarathul turned those galaxy eyes toward her, and Marcus saw his first officer actually take a step backward. "I told you, I am a guardian. We are the children of the first civilization to achieve true understanding of the universe's fundamental forces. We were old when your son was young, and we will be here long after it has burned to ash." "But the Guardians are myths," protested the weapons officer. "Stories told to children. Myths have power," Zarathul replied with what might have been amusement. "Sometimes more power than truth. We encouraged those myths when we chose to withdraw from galactic affairs. It made it easier to watch and learn without interference." Marcus felt pieces clicking into place in his mind. "That's why you let yourself be captured. You weren't helpless. You were studying the Korthak, among other things." She moved toward the captain's chair with that fluid grace, and Marcus found himself stepping aside without conscious thought. The Korthak had been growing bolder in recent months. Their raids have become more frequent, more brutal. They are testing the responses of various species, learning which ones can be preyed upon with impunity, and which species fight back, Marcus added, beginning to understand. "Precisely. But more than that, they have been searching for something. Someone, to be more accurate." Her expression grew serious. "They have been looking for guardians." The implications of that statement hit Marcus like a physical blow. "They're hunting your people?" "Not hunting, collecting. There are those in the galaxy who would pay enormous sums for a guardian, alive and contained. Our knowledge, our abilities, we represent power that many would kill for." Rodriguez moved to her console, her fingers dancing over the controls. "I'm picking up increased chatter on the Korthak frequencies. They're regrouping, calling in reinforcements." Zarathul nodded, as though she had expected this. "They will not give up easily. The bounty on my head alone would fund their operations for a century." "Then we get you out of here," Marcus said immediately. "Find somewhere safe dash." "There is nowhere safe, Marcus Chun." The way she said his name sent an odd shiver down his spine. "Not for me, and now, not for you either. By helping me, by witnessing what I truly am, you have become part of something much larger than a simple rescue mission." Marcus felt his jaw tighten. "Are you saying we're targets now?" "I'm saying you have a choice. You can transfer me to another vessel and try to forget what you have seen. The Korthak might leave you alone if I am no longer aboard your ship. Or," she paused, studying his face intently, "you can help me finish what I started." "Which is?" "The Korthak operation extends far beyond simple piracy. They are part of a larger network, one that trades in sentient beings across a dozen sectors. But, more importantly, they are connected to those who seek to capture and exploit my people." Her eyes began to glow again, just slightly. "I've spent months learning their organization, their methods, their weaknesses. With your help, I can end their operation permanently." Marcus looked around the bridge, at his crew. These were good people, volunteers who had joined the Earth Defense Fleet because they believed in protecting others. But what Zarathul was proposing would take them far beyond their original mission. "What exactly would you need us to do?" he asked. "The Korthak have a main base hidden in the nebula of lost souls. It is there that they process their captives, sort them by species and potential value, before shipping them to buyers throughout the galaxy. It is also where they have been gathering intelligence about Guardian movements. You want us to attack their main base?" Rodriguez sounded incredulous. "Captain, we're one ship. Even with whatever she can do, we'd be outnumbered 100-1. Zarathul smiled, and this time there was something predatory in the expression. "Numbers matter less when you understand the true nature of reality, Lieutenant Rodriguez. But you are correct that we cannot simply attack directly. Instead, we will do something they will never expect, which is, we will allow ourselves to be captured." The silence on the bridge was deafening. Marcus stared at the Guardian, trying to determine if she was serious. You want to walk into their trap? I want to complete my infiltration of their organization. They believe I am a helpless victim who was lucky enough to be rescued by kind humans. They do not know what I truly am, or they would never have risked letting me escape. When they come for me again, and we will be ready. But if they capture us, the weapons officer protested, we'll end up in their slave pens with everyone else. Will we? Zarathol's smile widened. I wonder. Marcus found himself considering the plan despite its apparent insanity. The Korthak had been a plague on this sector for years, and the official response had been pathetically inadequate. How many innocent beings had suffered while bureaucrats debated proper procedures? Assuming we went along with this madness, he said carefully, what will be the endgame? What happens after we're inside their base? We gather evidence of their operations, identify their buyers and suppliers, and then the temperature on the bridge seemed to drop several degrees. We ensure that none of them ever threaten innocent lives again. You're talking about destroying the entire base. I'm talking about justice, Captain Shun, for the thousands who have already died in their slave pens, and for the thousands more who will die if they are allowed to continue. Marcus looked around the bridge again, meeting the eyes of each crew member. He saw fear there, certainly, but also determination. These people had joined the fleet to make a difference, and here was a chance to do exactly that. There's one problem with your plan, he said finally. If the Korthak think you're just a helpless victim, why would they come after you so aggressively? Why risk 3 heavy cruisers for one escaped slave? For the first time since revealing her true nature, Zarathol looked uncomfortable. Because I may have underestimated my own value to them. Meaning, she sighed, a sound like wind through crystal caves. Meaning that during my captivity, I was forced to demonstrate certain abilities to prevent them from harming other prisoners. Small things, healing injuries, providing light in dark spaces, sharing food that never seemed to diminish. I thought I was being subtle, but they figured out you weren't human, or Zalonian, or whatever you were pretending to be. Indeed, which means they know they had something valuable, and they will not rest until they reclaim their prize. She looked directly at him. I am sorry, Marcus Chun. By rescuing me, you have inherited my enemies. Marcus felt a strange calm settle over him. It was the same feeling he'd experienced before every major decision in his life. The moment when all the uncertainty fell away, and he knew exactly what he had to do. Rodriguez, set course for the nebula of lost souls, he ordered. His first officer stared at him. Sir, if we're going to do this, we do it right. Full sensor sweep of the area, maximum stealth approach. I want to know everything about their operation before we make our move. Captain, the weapons officer said slowly, are you sure about this? Marcus looked at Zarathul, who was watching him with an expression he couldn't quite read. We swore an oath to protect innocent life wherever we found it. The Korthak have made that our fight, whether we wanted it or not. Very well, Zarathul said, and something in her voice suggested approval. But understand, Marcus Chun, that once we begin this path, there will be no turning back. The forces we will set in motion will reshape this entire sector. Good, Marcus replied. It's about time. As the Defiant changed course toward the distant nebula, Marcus found himself wondering what he had just committed his crew to. But every time doubt crept in, he remembered the sight of Zarathul chained in that cargo hold, remembered the other prisoners they had freed, and thought about all the ones they hadn't been able to save. Some fights were worth the risk. Some battles had to be fought, regardless of the odds. Behind him, Zarathul watched the stars whirl past, and smiled a secret smile. The young captain had no idea what he had just set in motion, but she was beginning to think that might be exactly what the galaxy needed. After all, the best leaders were often those who acted from principle rather than calculation. And Marcus Chun, she was discovering, was very much that kind of leader. The Guardians had been watching humanity for decades, waiting to see what kind of people they would become as they spread among the stars. This might be the test that determined whether they were ready for the larger truth about the universe and the responsibilities that came with it. The Nebula of Lost Souls earned its ominous name honestly. Swirling clouds of ionized gas and debris from ancient stellar collisions created a maze of sensor shadows and navigation hazards that stretched across several light years. It was the perfect place to hide a base of operations, especially for those who preferred their business remain unobserved by galactic authorities. Marcus stood in the Defiance observation deck, watching the nebula grow larger on the view screen as they approached at minimal power. They had been traveling for 3 days since leaving the scene of their encounter with the Korthak cruisers, and during that time, Zarathal had proven to be both an invaluable advisor and a constant source of mysteries. She had shown them how to modify their shields to better blend with the nebula's natural energy patterns, making them nearly invisible to conventional sensors. She had guided them through navigation routes that seemed impossible, threading between pockets of deadly radiation and gravitational anomalies that should have torn the ship apart. And she had done it all while maintaining the facade of being simply a rescued prisoner who happened to know a bit about this region of space. But Marcus was beginning to understand that nothing about Zarathal was simple. "We're approaching the coordinates," Rodriguez reported from the bridge. "Initial scans show, well, this is interesting." Marcus activated his comm unit. "Define interesting, Lieutenant." "There's definitely something artificial in there, Captain. Massive structure, maybe several kilometers across. But it's not showing up on any of our databases. This isn't just a pirate base, it's a full shipyard and processing facility." Marcus felt his stomach drop. A facility that size would house thousands of prisoners and hundreds of Korthak raiders. What had started as a rescue mission was looking more and more like a suicide mission. "Captain," Zarathal's voice came from behind him, and he turned to find her standing in the doorway of the observation deck. She had changed from a standard jumpsuit into something that looked like it had been woven from starlight and shadow, flowing robes that seemed to shift and shimmer with their own inner light. "It is time we discussed the next phase of our plan." "Our plan?" Marcus raised an eyebrow. "I thought the plan was to get captured and then improvise." She moved to stand beside him at the view screen, and he caught that impossible scent again, moonflowers and starlight, and something that made him think of home, though he couldn't explain why. "The plan, dear Captain, is somewhat more complex than that." "I am listening." "The Korthak base is indeed massive, as your Lieutenant Rodriguez has discovered. It services not just local raiders, but operations across multiple sectors. At any given time, there are between 2,000 and 3,000 prisoners held there, representing dozens of species." Marcus felt his jaw clench. 3,000 innocent beings, trapped in the depths of that facility while the galaxy's governments debated proper procedures for intervention. "More importantly," Zarathal continued, "the base serves as a hub for information gathering. The Korthak may seem like simple pirates, but they are actually part of a much larger organization. One that has been mapping Guardian movements for the better part of a decade." "Why would anyone want to map Guardian movements? I thought your people had withdrawn from galactic affairs." Zarathal was quiet for a long moment, her galaxy eyes reflecting the swirling colors of the nebula. "There are factions among the younger races who believe the Guardians have grown weak, complacent. They think that beings who withdraw from conflict have forgotten how to fight." "Have you?" She turned to look at him, and for just an instant he saw something vast and ancient and utterly implacable looking back. "What do you think, Marcus Chun?" Before he could answer, his comm unit crackled to life. "Captain to the bridge, emergency." They reached the bridge to find the crew gathered around the sensor array, their expressions ranging from confusion to alarm. Rodriguez looked up as they entered. "Captain, we're picking up multiple vessels converging on our position. It looks like the entire Korthak fleet from this sector." Marcus moved to his captain's chair, his mind racing. "How many ships?" 15 confirmed, maybe more hiding in the sensor shadows. "They're not approaching directly. Looks like they're trying to surround us." "They're being unusually cautious," observed the weapons officer. "Usually Korthak raiders just charge in with guns blazing." Zarathul moved to stand beside Marcus's chair, her expression thoughtful. They have learned to respect human tenacity in battle, and they suspect what they're truly hunting. Captain, Rodriguez called out. We're receiving a transmission. Universal frequency, standard protocols. Put it through. The main view screen flickered, and a face appeared that made Marcus's blood run cold. The being was clearly Korthak, reptilian features, yellow eyes, and scarred skin that spoke of a lifetime of violence. But this one wore the elaborate headdress of a fleet commander, and his eyes held an intelligence that set him apart from the typical raider. I am Fleet Commander Vexthak, the creature said, his voice carrying the typical Korthak hiss. You are the humans who stole our property 3 days ago. We rescued prisoners, Marcus replied evenly. Sentient beings are not property. Semantics. Vexthak's tongue flicked out in what Marcus recognized as a gesture of amusement. Return the female you took from us, and we will allow you to depart unharmed. Not happening. The Korthak commander's eyes narrowed. Perhaps you do not understand the situation, human. You are surrounded by 15 battle cruisers in the heart of our territory. Your single ship, however brave, cannot hope to survive what we will bring against you. Marcus felt Zarathul's hand touch his shoulder lightly, and suddenly he understood what she wanted him to do. Maybe, he said, allowing a note of uncertainty to enter his voice. But we're not going down without a fight. But what if there was another option? Vexthak leaned forward, his scarred features twisting into what might have been a smile. What if I offered you something better than a warrior's death? I'm listening. Join us, Marcus Chun. Bring your ship and crew into our service. We have need of beings with your tactical skills and your flexible morality. In exchange, you will share in the profits of our endeavors, and your people will live. The bridge fell silent. Marcus could feel his crew watching him, waiting to see how he would respond to the offer. Out of the corner of his eye, he saw Zarathul give the slightest of nods. And if I refuse, then you will die here, and we will take the female anyway, along with the rest of your crew, who will bring excellent prices in the slave markets of the Outer Rim. Marcus pretended to consider this, letting the silence stretch until he could almost feel Vexthak's impatience. What kind of profits are we talking about? The Korthak commander's expression shifted to one of satisfied greed. More than you can imagine, human. The organization we serve has resources that span a dozen sectors. We are not mere pirates. We are merchants in the most valuable commodity in the galaxy, which is life itself. Sentient life, shaped and molded to serve the needs of those with the wealth to afford such luxuries. Vexthak's tongue flicked out again. Your species, for instance, has proven quite popular among certain buyers. Humans are resilient, intelligent, and have a fascinating capacity for both loyalty and rebellion, depending on how they are conditioned. Marcus felt his hands clench involuntarily, but he forced his voice to remain level. Sounds profitable. What would you need from us? Immediate surrender, of course. You will be escorted to our base for processing and evaluation. Those among your crew who show promise will be offered positions in our organization. The others? Vexthak shrugged. Well, not everyone is suited for command roles. And the female prisoner we rescued, she will be returned to her proper place. We have buyers who are very interested in her particular attributes. Marcus looked around the bridge at his crew, seeing the disgust and anger in their faces. These people had joined the Earth Defense Fleet to protect innocent life, not to participate in its exploitation. But they were also disciplined enough to play their parts when necessary. Give me a few minutes to discuss this with my crew, Marcus said finally. Of course, but do not take too long, Captain Shun. My patience has limits, and my gunners are eager for target practice. The transmission cut off, leaving the bridge in tense silence. Marcus looked around at his people, reading the determination in their eyes. Well, Rodriguez said quietly, I guess we're really doing this. Last chance to back out, Marcus said. What Zarathul is proposing is going to be dangerous beyond anything we've faced before. Captain, the weapons officer said, after what we just heard, I don't think any of us could live with ourselves if we walked away. Marcus nodded, feeling a surge of pride in his crew. Then we do this right. Rodriguez, prepare a surrender transmission. Make it convincing. We're desperate humans who see a chance to save our own skins. Aye, sir. And everyone remember, once we're inside that base, we follow Zarathul's lead. She knows that facility better than we do. He turned to the Guardian, who had been listening to the exchange with that enigmatic smile. Any last-minute advice? Trust in your people, she said simply. And remember that sometimes the greatest victories come from those who refuse to surrender, even when surrender seems like the only option. Cryptic as always, Marcus muttered, but he found himself smiling despite the situation. As Rodriguez began composing their surrender message, Marcus found himself wondering what they were walking into. The Korthak base would be heavily fortified, filled with armed raiders and thousands of prisoners. Even with Zarathul's abilities, the odds seemed impossible. But then he thought about the 3,000 innocent beings trapped in that facility and the untold numbers who would follow them if the operation was allowed to continue. Some fights had to be fought, regardless of the odds. Transmission ready, Captain, Rodriguez reported. Send it, Marcus ordered, and then prepare the ship for boarding. It's time to see what we're really made of. As a message went out to Fleet Commander Vexthak, Marcus caught Zarathul watching him with an expression he couldn't quite read. There was approval there, certainly, but something else as well. Something that looked almost like anticipation. Whatever was about to happen in that Korthak base, Marcus had the distinct feeling that Vexthak and his raiders were about to discover that they had made a very serious mistake in underestimating both humans and Guardians. The trap was set. Now all they had to do was spring it from the inside. The Korthak base was even more massive than Marcus had imagined. As their escort ships guided the Defiant through the outer defensive perimeter, he could see the true scope of the operation unfolding before them. The structure was less a base than a city, kilometers of interconnected modules, docking bays, and processing facilities that stretched through the heart of the nebula like a metallic cancer. Magnificent, isn't it? Fleet Commander Vexthak had boarded their ship personally for the final approach, along with a full squad of armed raiders. 10 years of construction, using the finest engineers from a dozen conquered worlds. This facility can process over 5,000 beings simultaneously and house a fleet of 200 vessels. Marcus nodded appreciatively, though the sight made his stomach turn. Through the viewports, he could see other ships docked at various levels. Not just Korthak raiders, but vessels from multiple species. This wasn't just a pirate base. It was a trading hub for the entire slave network. Beside him, Zarathul maintained her role as a defeated prisoner, but Marcus noticed how her eyes tracked every detail of the base's layout. She was memorizing everything: defensive positions, structural weak points, escape routes. The performance was flawless, right down to the subtle way she flinched whenever one of the Korthak guards looked in her direction. Your ship will be docked in Bay 47, Vexthak continued. Your crew will be given temporary quarters while we evaluate their potential. Those who prove useful will be offered positions in our organization. The others, he shrugged in that casual way that spoke of countless lives reduced to mere commodities. Marcus nodded toward Zarathul. The female will be placed in our special holding facility. We have buyers who are very interested in rare specimens, and she is quite rare indeed. Vexthak's tongue flicked out hungrily. Her sale alone will fund operations for months. As the Defiant settled into its assigned docking bay, Marcus felt the artificial gravity shift slightly. They were now inside the base, surrounded by enemies and hundreds of kilometers from the nearest exit. For most people, it would have been a hopeless situation. But Marcus was beginning to understand that Zarathul was not most people. The boarding process was efficient and brutally professional. Marcus and his crew were separated into groups, officers, specialists, and general crew, and led through different sections of the base. Marcus found himself assigned to what Vexthac called the Command Evaluation Center, a sterile complex of offices and briefing rooms where potential recruits were tested and processed. Zarathul, as expected, was taken in a different direction entirely. "Don't worry about your female," one of the Korthak guards said with obvious amusement as they watched her being led away. "Special holding has all the amenities. Food, water, medical care. We keep our premium merchandise in excellent condition." Marcus bit back his immediate response and forced himself to nod. "Good. She's been through enough already." Over the next several hours, Marcus was subjected to a series of interviews and tests designed to evaluate his potential value to the organization. He answered questions about Earth's military capabilities, trade routes, and defensive strategies, mixing truth with carefully crafted lies to create a picture of humanity that was accurate enough to be believable, but incomplete enough to be useless. His interrogators seemed impressed by his tactical knowledge and his apparent willingness to cooperate. By the end of the day, he had been offered a provisional position as a tactical advisor for raids in human space. "You understand," explained the Korthak officer handling his case. "This is a trial period. Prove your value to the organization, and you will be rewarded accordingly. Fail to meet expectations." "Understand perfectly," Marcus replied. "When do I start?" "Tomorrow. But tonight, you'll have the opportunity to tour our facilities. Consider it an orientation to your new life." That evening, Marcus found himself part of a group of potential recruits being given a guided tour of the base. The group included several other humans from various ships that had been recruited over the past months, along with representatives from a dozen other species. All wore the same expression of carefully controlled desperation, beings who had chosen collaboration over death, though Marcus suspected many of them were playing the same game he was. The tour was clearly designed to impress and intimidate. They were shown the massive ship construction facilities where captured engineers built vessels for the raider fleets. They visited the training centers where new recruits learned to operate Korthak technology and tactics. They walked through the command centers where operations across multiple sectors were coordinated with military precision. But it was the last stop on the tour that truly revealed the scope of the operation. "And this," their guide announced with obvious pride, "is our primary processing facility." They emerged onto a viewing platform overlooking a vast chamber that stretched away into the distance. Below them, Marcus could see thousands of beings organized into neat rows of holding cells. Humans, Zalorians, Thraxians, and dozens of species he didn't recognize, all reduced to inventory waiting to be sorted and shipped. "At any given time, we house between 3 and 5,000 units here," the guide continued. "They're sorted by species, age, skill level, and physical condition. Premium specimens are kept in special holding, while bulk inventory is prepared for transport to various markets throughout the galaxy." Marcus forced himself to look interested rather than horrified. "How do you handle security with that many prisoners?" "Neural control collars," the guide replied, indicating a series of control stations around the perimeter of the chamber. Each collar could deliver varying levels of pain or unconsciousness as needed. The subjects quickly learned to comply with instructions. One of the other humans in the group, a woman Marcus didn't recognize, spoke up. "What about escape attempts?" "Extremely rare. The collars are powered by the subject's own bioelectric fields. They cannot be removed without specialized equipment. And even if someone managed to escape their cell, where would they go? We are in the heart of a nebula, hundreds of light years from the nearest inhabited system." As they walked along the viewing platform, Marcus scanned the holding cells below, looking for any sign of Zarathul. The special holding area was apparently on a different level, but he wanted to get a sense of the facility's layout for when the time came to act. It was then that he saw something that made his blood freeze. In one of the cells far below, a group of children huddled together in terror. They couldn't have been more than 10 or 12 years old, representing multiple species, and they all wore the same neural control collars as the adult prisoners. "You sell children?" The question was out of his mouth before he could stop himself. The guide looked at him with surprise. Of course, youth commands premium prices in many markets. Some buyers prefer to train their acquisitions from an early age. Marcus felt his hands clench into fists, and it took every ounce of his self-control not to grab the nearest weapon and start shooting. Around him, he could see similar reactions from several other members of the tour group, beings who had thought they were prepared for the reality of the slave trade, but were discovering that nothing could have prepared them for this. "Is there a problem?" the guide asked, noticing the tension in the group. "No problem," Marcus managed, just impressed by the scope of the operation. The guide seemed satisfied with this response and continued the tour, but Marcus barely heard the rest of the presentation. His mind was focused on one single, burning thought. This entire facility needed to burn, and everyone responsible for creating it needed to pay. When the tour finally ended, the potential recruits were escorted back to their temporary quarters. Marcus found himself assigned to a small but comfortable room in the officers' section, complete with a computer terminal that gave him access to basic information about the base's operations. He was reviewing shipping schedules and trying to memorize the facility's layout when his door chimed softly. "Enter," he called, expecting one of the Korthak officers with additional instructions. Instead, Zarathul stepped into his room. She was no longer wearing the ragged clothes of a prisoner, but instead had been given an elegant gown that seemed to complement her ethereal beauty perfectly. Her silver hair had been arranged in an intricate style, and delicate jewelry adorned her wrists and throat. She looked like a princess preparing for a royal banquet, rather than a captive awaiting sale. "Zarathul," Marcus stood quickly, moving toward her. "How did you dash?" She raised one finger to her lips, then gestured toward the computer terminal. Marcus understood immediately and activated a music file, filling the room with soft instrumental sounds that would mask their conversation from any surveillance equipment. "The special holding facility is quite luxurious," she said quietly, settling gracefully into one of the room's chairs. "They want their premium merchandise to look its best for potential buyers. Are you all right? Have they hurt you? I am unharmed, and I have learned much about this organization over the past few hours." Her galaxy eyes were bright with a cold anger that made Marcus take an involuntary step backward. "Did you know that they have been operating here for over 10 years? 10 years, Marcus Chun, during which they have processed over 50,000 sentient beings." Marcus felt his stomach turn. 50,000. Children, adults, elderly beings who could no longer care for themselves. It makes no difference to them. They're all simply products to be sorted and sold. She stood, moving to the small viewport that looked out into the heart of the base. "They have buyers throughout the galaxy. Governments, corporations, private individuals. Anyone with enough credits can purchase sentient beings for whatever purpose they desire." "How long before they try to sell you?" 3 days. There will be an auction, attended by their most valued customers. I will be the featured lot." She turned back to him, and her smile was sharp enough to cut steel. "They have no idea what they are truly selling." Marcus studied her face, seeing something there that made him think of storms building on the horizon. "What do you need from me?" "Access to the base's central computer core, and a distraction that will draw attention away from the lower levels." "What kind of distraction?" "The kind that will convince them that their new human recruits are not quite as cooperative as they appeared." Marcus felt a grin tug at the corners of his mouth. "I think we can arrange something." "What about my crew?" "Already in position. Your Lieutenant Rodriguez has been assigned to the communications center. Your weapons officer is working in the armory. Your engineer has access to the main power grid." Zarathul's smile widened. "It seems the Korthak value human technical expertise quite highly." "And you arranged all of this?" "I may have influenced certain personnel decisions. The Guardians have always been skilled at encouraging beings to make the choices we prefer." Marcus shook his head in amazement. "Is there anything you can't do?" "I cannot save those 50,000 beings who have already been sold and shipped across the galaxy," she replied, her expression growing serious. "But I can ensure that no more will follow them. Tomorrow night, during the auction, this facility will cease to exist. What about the 3,000 prisoners currently being held here? They will be free. I give you my word on that. Marcus looked into those impossible eyes and saw something that made him believe her completely. Whatever Zarathul was planning, it would be far more than just an escape attempt. She was preparing to bring down the entire operation. What do you need me to do? She moved toward the door, then paused to look back at him. When the time comes, Marcus Chun, remember what you told me about humans being strong enough to help others when they don't have to. You are about to discover just how strong your species truly is. After she left, Marcus stood in the quiet room for a long time, thinking about everything he had seen and heard. 3,000 innocent beings trapped in the holding cells below. Thousands more who would follow them if this operation was allowed to continue. And somewhere out there, 50,000 victims who had already been lost to this nightmare. Tomorrow night, during the auction, it would all end. He didn't know exactly how, but he trusted Zarathul completely. She was a guardian, a member of a race that had watched over the galaxy since before humans had learned to make fire. If anyone could end this horror, it was her. As he prepared for sleep, Marcus found himself thinking about the children in those holding cells. Whatever happened tomorrow, those children would be free. That alone made everything else worthwhile. The auction would be the slavers' greatest triumph, showcasing their most valuable merchandise to their wealthiest customers. Instead, it would become their final performance, and Zarathul would be the star of the show in ways they could never imagine. The galaxy was about to remember why the Guardians were once feared and revered across 1,000 worlds. And the Korthak were about to learn that some prizes are far too dangerous to claim.